Welcome everyone to our next installment of Rebels with a Heart, the New Rules of Leadership. We're just going to get started in just one moment to introduce our esteemed guests and panelists. Thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Sorry.
So again, welcome everyone to our next edition of Rebels with the Heart, the New Rules of Leadership. Thrilled to be with all of you and our esteemed guests and leaders here today. Very excited to welcome each of you. Welcome Laila, Libby, and Garry. Just as we get started here, I'm going to introduce or allow each of you to introduce yourselves, a little bit about your background, your roles, your day-to-day, and some of your guiding principles. And then we will jump into a very live and active and dynamic conversation. So appreciate each of you spending time with us today. So Laila, why don't we start with you?
Hi, I'm Leila Taraff. I'm the Chief People Officer at Allbirds. Allbirds is a New Zealand American company that produces sustainable footwear and now apparel. We started in 2016 and we are headquartered here in the Bay Area, but we have offices and stores really all over the world. Prior to Allbirds, I spent about 7 years as an advisor in private equity. And before that, I had two big HR operating roles, one at Peet's Coffee and one at the first internet division of Walmart. I'm excited to be here today to talk about leading with love. And I love the fact that we can talk about it even openly as we do in 2021. It's been a long time coming.
Absolutely. Well said, Laila. Thank you. So Libby, we'll go over to you as the next introduction. Thank you again.
Sure. I'm Libby Sartain. I formerly was a CHRO for many years. I spent about 40 years in human resources for both Yahoo and for Southwest Airlines. And I now spend my time as an independent board member for both for-profit companies and not-for-profit companies, and do a lot of community work on the side. I think most apropos to our conversation today is in 2002, I can't even believe it's almost been 20 years. I wrote a book called HR from the Heart, and that was unheard of at the time to mention the word heart in a business book. Unfortunately, a lot of ideas I have were way before their time, but they're all coming to fruition now. So that's very heartening to see. And that book, I hope, has influenced the thinking in this area and as we move forward. So I'm very excited about that.
I love your pioneering spirit. I'm looking forward to talking with you about that. So thank you, Libby. Yeah. And we'll come over to you, Garry. Thank you as well for joining us.
Yeah, g'day. Thank you. I'm Garry Ridge. I'm the chairman of and CEO of WD-40 Company, that little blue and yellow can with a little red top that you probably have somewhere. I'm delighted to be here today because I believe that the most important thing we have in business is people. I believe that as leaders, we have a lot of obligation to create a place where people go to work every day, they make a contribution to something bigger than themselves, they learn something new, they feel they're protected by a compelling set of values, and they go home happy. Because happy people build happy communities, and happy communities build a happy world, and by gosh, we need a happy world. And for the past 23 or 4 years, I've been privileged to lead the tribe at WD-40 Company. And we've proven that if you really care about your people and you really create this environment, you can not only be a great place to work, but you can be a company that creates incredible value for its shareholders. We're a public company. Our market cap today is about $4.2 billion. When we started this journey about 20 years ago, our market cap was about $300 million. And over that time, we nearly 5x'd our revenue, and we sell our product in 176 countries around the world. So we've proven that if you care about your people and you treat them with respect and dignity, and you give them the opportunity to stay the best version of their personal self every day, purpose-driven, passionate people create amazing outcomes. Delighted to be here, and like I'm the thorn between two roses.
Me too. Well said, Garry. And all of you are very, very impressive. And thank you for spending your time with us today and sharing your wisdom and heart with everyone here. So I just want to also say, I'm Lundsten, President and CEO of LifeGuides. And we are a platform that connects people for peer-to-peer support through navigating life challenges and opportunities so that people can be happier, healthier, and more productive, both in and outside of their work. And obviously that's been a year that we've really been able to serve our mission in a powerful way. And I'd like to also say that one of our core values as an organization is love overall. So we actually are taking a very specific stand for bringing this into the market and leading from that perspective. So my first question for each of you, when you think about the context of leading with love and love in the context of business specifically, how do you define that? I think everyone has an intuitive sense of what love is, but I think it's helpful for each of us to define what that means and how you convey that, communicate it, show it to the people that are in your charge as a leader and for those of your stakeholders. So any of you can take that first question and we'll just start bantering about. So thank you again.
I'll take it because my story is the oldest story, and then you can build from that. But I started working for Southwest Airlines in 1988, and the reason why love was part of our vernacular at the company is quite unusual, because the airport we served in Dallas, which was our headquarters location, was called Love Field. And it was not named after the emotion love. It was named after someone whose last name was Love. But we began to advertise saying love is in the air because we were flying to Love Field and we're going to love you all over Texas. And one day it kind of dawned on us that, and this was in actually the 70s. So I was in high school when this was going on, but it dawned on us that you could not have an airline that was promising love if you had normal, surly airline employees. So where it started for us was to a people strategy that was like, we need to hire people who are different than your normal surly airline employees who really care about people. And very much key to that was treating a customer like you want your own mom or your own, family member to be treated when they flew on Southwest. So the very first part of our value there was sort of the golden rule. And that I'll just let it sit there and we can build on that as we go forward. But that's how it became part of the conversation for us and how we kind of paved the way for others. And it was kind of by accident.
That's a great story. I've never heard that. I'll jump in. I think that I mean, love is a big word, and the Greeks have different words for the different types of love, right? And for us, I think it feels like the natural evolution of what I've been seeing over the last 20 years. I remember when I was at Pete's, we started to say, we want you to bring your whole self to work. And this was 2006 or so. And at the time, that seemed a little bit of a radical idea, which is, well, what do you mean your whole self? And we sort of introduced this idea that, well, you are one whole person. There's not a personal self and a professional self, because I think, in the 80s and 90s, you definitely put on your suit and you went to work and you left, the more personal sides of you at home. And even for women, I'll never forget this. There was a woman at Pete's that said to me back in the early days, she says, yeah, I've broken myself from saying I feel. I now say I think, because she judged I feel that wasn't seen as, I guess, as seriously in business. So look how far we've come. And so I think if we started talking about bring your whole self to work, whatever, 15 years ago, I think that naturally now evolves to the fact that the walls are breaking down between the person and the company. And now in the last year, it's definitely broken down, like work is at home and home is at work, and it's all melded together. And so I think, what else could there be? And another word for love for me within companies is to care, right? People want to know you care about them beyond the fact that they're an employee. And I don't know who said this, but I say it all the time. The adage, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Mm-hmm. I heard that maybe 20 years ago, and it just really stuck in my mind. And people don't stay at companies forever in the way that they used to. They're going to come and they're going to go, and that's fine. But as long as while they are with your company, they know you care about them as people, beyond the value that their employment gives to the organization. I think that's what it really comes down to.
Well said, Laila. I'll come back to that concept in just a moment. Garry, over to you for your perspective on this.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to use the word belonging. If we think about Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualization, the first two rungs of that are, am I safe? Is there food? Can I survive? And then we go to one that says belonging or love. And everybody on this call today has either left a party, an organization, or even a relationship because they didn't feel like they belonged. And why do most people leave organizations? They didn't feel like they belong. And why don't they feel like they belong? Well, it's because the leadership in the organization doesn't love their people enough to be sharing with them the moments of joy, and aren't brave enough to, in a caring and sharing way, redirect them when they need to. So, loving leadership is a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted, and the genius is in the middle. So it's a fact that 67% of people would leave their job, or if they could sack their, or they would like to sack their boss, which is really, really sad. So I think belonging and creating that bond of belonging. You belong here because we care about you.
Well said. I think that, yeah, go ahead, Libby.
I was just going to say, Garry always goes right to the core, but I think that word is so important, not just in the context of culture, but when you really think of diversity and inclusion, that is really what inclusion is all about. Yes. And that is the aspect of D&I that so many organizations have struggled with. And I think I'm encouraged because I think we're beginning to get it collectively and make progress for the first time. So just wanted to add that because that's so important.
You read my mind, Libby. I was going to say that's about expanding the arms, right? It's like a hug. How do we include more people in that culture of belonging? How do we, and to your point, we talked about cultures of caring. How do we as leaders create an environment where people are cared for and we are actively cultivating a sense of caring? That golden rule, as you talk about, Libby. So, I mean, everything that you all said, I completely agree with all of that. So on a practical level, because I think you kind of gave voice to this, Garry, it's the combination of this core value that we all acknowledge, and then the practical nature of how we measure business, and how do we have those hard conversations with people that are delivered in such a way that they are received as intended. And I think that's the art, right? That's the true art of leadership as we're evolving now into this new paradigm of leadership. I would love to hear stories. I mean, each of you are so accomplished. How have you practice that? How have you developed that? Give us some stories over the last 11 months in particular of how that's manifested within this new environment that we're working and living in.
I can kick off if you like.
Please.
I think it comes back to the fundamental foundation of an organization, which is really around what are the values of the organization? Do you have a clearly defined set of values that remind people of what it looks like to be here? And let me give you an example of how values can help you in an organization. Our second value in our company is we exist to create positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. That's our second value. So whether we're having a crucial conversation or whatever it is, we want to do it with respect and dignity, and we want people to leave with a positive, lasting memory. Some time back, we were having a meeting, and there was someone in the meeting that was having a very bad morning. In fact, you could feel the toxicity coming out of them. This was not their day of joy. So, how would you handle that situation? Well, fortunately, we have our values to rely on. So when the meeting was over, I said to this person, "Hey, Derek, let's go for a walk." And we went outside the building, and I looked behind a car and under a tree and in a trash can. And Derek said, "What the hell are you doing?" And I said, "Derek, I'm looking for you. The Derek I know and love wasn't in that room today. The Derek I know and love who wants to live our value of creating positive, lasting memories wasn't doing that today. Derek, what's on your mind? How can I help you?" And we had a conversation, and Derek had a really bad morning, and we did some coaching. And at the end of it, he went back into the building, and he went to the people in the meeting and said, "I'm really sorry, I'm just having a bad morning." And the next morning, I observed that people that were in that meeting were going to Derek and saying, "Hey, Derek, are you okay today? Is there anything I can do to help you?" So by being able to rely on a value that was established and a definition of what that meant, we were able to address a toxic situation without confrontation and anger and all the other stuff that normally goes with it. So that's a little example from how I would see it.
Very powerful. Thank you, Garry. Go
That's
ahead,
a
Libby.
great example.
Or Leila, either one. Yeah, I can see both of you want to chime in, so go right ahead, either one of you.
Go ahead, Laila. I'll bring up the rear.
Okay. I mean, this is something I talk about all the time, right? Having hard conversations. I think that there's a misnomer that if you are going to deliver a tough message, that somehow you need to disconnect from your humanity and become this other person who's going to just call it as it is. And actually, the opposite is true. If you are able to develop the emotional capacity and resilience and resonance to stay present with the person you're speaking with, despite the hard conversation, to pay attention to the context as well as the content, right? And Garry, your story is so beautiful because you paid attention to the body language. You know, he just was off a little bit, right? And a lot of times, I think we sense that, and then we don't really say anything about it, and it just sort of remains hidden. So having the courage to be able to say, "Hey, what's going," in a kind way, not in a judgmental way. And then I'm struck by how much kindness and courage it takes, right? So courage and compassion. I'm always playing with these sort of both sides of the same coin. You said it again earlier, Garry. You said being tough-minded and tender-hearted. I think it is at the intersection of all these things that seem like they are on opposite ends of the spectrum, where all the art is in how we build great cultures and how we treat people honestly, fairly directly, yet compassionately. So that's been my experience. And I think as leaders, you have to have done your own work to be able to show up in that way, because if you yourself haven't, or you're getting triggered, you're not going to be able to show up as your best self. You're not going to be able to show up your best self every day, that's for sure. But if you are, more days than not, then on your bad days, others will be there for you as well.
Well said, Leila. Go ahead, Libby.
Well, what I really learned from the late, great Herb Kelleher, and I try to emulate this, not always successfully, but in all of my leadership roles, is the idea of servant leadership, where the main goal of the leader is to serve the people you lead. And then the test of whether or not you are a servant leader is, did people learn and grow during the time that they were with you? Because as Laila said, people come and go. So your goal is to make sure that they're better when they leave, and that you've helped them get better for whatever it is that comes next. If you live your life like that and you work with people and you're delivering tough messages, you start with the beginning is, I'm delivering this tough message because I'm helping you get better. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say, a high percentage, 95% or more, will learn to trust you and learn to believe you and learn not to be defensive and learn that you're trying to help them. And then there's one or two in every crowd that you are telling them that because you're mean or you're discriminating or you whatever. But nobody wakes up, well, very few people wake up every morning and say, I want to ruin someone's day. And I've even said that to those one or two. Yeah, you know what? I lie in bed every night and think, whose day do I want to ruin today? And then they go, oh, you're trying to help me, right? Yes, I am. So I think that's the way to deliver a tough message. But in current times, when we're meeting in this little staring at our iPad meetings, that's really hard because you can't go for a walk, Garry. And so then what I've done a couple of times is in between meetings, call some of the folks that, need help and try to make sure I understand all the issues. And I have had some good results with that. And then I've had a couple of those results that haven't been as good because guess what? You can't solve every issue either. You can't fix every person. And I have to accept that as well.
Yeah, you raised an interesting point. So, go ahead, Garry. Go ahead.
Tag onto that a little, and I just want to support what Libby says. if we reflect on the times when we need to have that redirection conversation, it's we who are instigating the conversation that have the most fear. And what it's become clear to me is if I'm not brave enough and if I don't love someone enough to have that conversation because I want to help redirect them to a better place, then I am not being the leader I need to be. I'm being selfish because I don't want to feel that rejection that I would initially get from someone that I said, hey, I just need to have a conversation with you because I believe you can be in a better place than you are now. Is it okay? And unfortunately, we're the ones that get shy about it. How many leaders walk away from having that conversation that eventually the interaction ends up not in conversation, but in having a huge conflict?
So taking that a step,
100%.
go ahead, Laila. Yeah, go ahead, Laila.
No, I think that's right on, Garry. That's what I was saying earlier, which is that as a leader, you have to recognize that it is emotionally, these conversations take a toll on you emotionally, and how you hold yourself, how you engage in them is going to make all the difference. I feel like I want to say something here. I remember I went back and got my coaching credentials about 12 years ago, and I'll never forget this, a point in time where I was just learning how to sort of diagnose and be a good coach. And I went to my coaching instructor and I said, okay, here are all the things I've figured out that are wrong with this person, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to do this. And he looked at me. I didn't know what I was doing. And we stopped, and he said, Laila, he said, coaching is not about like enumerating all the things that are wrong that you have to fix, which I was immediately embarrassed by. He said, coaching is about seeing what is beautiful in someone and getting them to see it too. And for me, that was a big shift in my orientation, right? Because I think when you're earlier in your career, you're just focused on making shit happen, getting things done, driving results, right? It's Marshall Goldsmith that said, what got you here won't get you there, right? And so you're not quite yet focused on enabling others and being there for others. And I was still in my, okay, what's broken? I got to fix it. Let's go. That's how I add value. And it was a moment in time where I realized, oh, I need to focus on what's going right and the positive and the beautiful, and enable and get them to see it that way too. It doesn't mean I'm not still solving problems in other ways, but as a leader, it becomes more about enabling others and creating the conditions for people to do great work than you actually solving the problem to add value directly.
Leila, a parallel to that is something we were talking about before we got on here about the game of rugby, because I'm an Aussie and you work for a New Zealand company and they love to get on the rugby field. The great rugby coaches don't run on the field and want to play the game. They're on the sideline and in the locker room, observing the play, looking for the greatness in the player, helping the player see the greatness, and also helping them see another place of greatness they could go to. So the great coaches don't run on the field.
That's a good line. That's a really good line.
Yeah, they're the epitome of guides, as we say. So I'm going to bring a question in from our audience kind of along these lines of something you were talking about. So the concept of trust, and we hear a lot in the context of business about transparency, and they're big words that we hear a lot in HR and in business, and obviously necessary for building loving relationships. Any examples that each of you has as leaders where you're radiating these examples of trust and transparency within your companies? That was a question from one of our audience members.
I believe that the biggest negative impact on trust is fear. And I believe that most people don't lie. And I believe most people fake and hide in organizations. And the reason they fake and hide is because there's a great level of fear. There's not a sense of vulnerability amongst the leadership. I invented someone called Al, the soul-sucking CEO. And Al has these behaviors that create fear in an organization. Al must always be right. Al is corporate royalty. Al has all the answers. Al is a micromanager. Al doesn't like feedback. Al doesn't do what he says he's going to do. Al hates learning. All of these things that create a fear of people being able to be who they want to be in an organization. And if that fear is there, they're going to fake and hide, which really means they're not going to be transparent. So what we need to do as leaders is to create an organization where we reduce fear. And if we reduce fear, then we will raise the level of trust.
So let me ask a question on that point, because I think you raised a really important topic. So in our collective society and species right now, we've lived through a year that has brought a lot of fear to everyone's forefront, right? Just as human beings, we're living in it. We've changed our way of living and working because people collectively are fearful, and also because they're concerned for the well-being of their fellow people, right? How do we, especially now, 11 months in, how do we raise the standard now? I think we hear a lot of examples of leaders and teams really coming together to coalesce and create that environment of belonging, that environment of safety, that feeling of looking out for the best of each other. But many people are a combination of tired and still fearful, right? There's still that subconscious driver, and people are just feeling the fatigue of carrying this weight together for 11 months. How do we push to another level now as leaders and in our collective organizations, tapping into that? Because it's a huge variable that's affecting our companies, and we've now shown huge resilience as a group of people. But what's next? How do where many people, you hear stories about this breaking point. How do we collectively guide people through that? How do we traverse that bridge? And I'd love to hear from each of you. Any thoughts on that?
I think the best leaders, during the pandemic were the ones who came out right away and just communicated, even if it was going to say, I don't know what we're going to do, but I'm trying to figure it out. Or, this is what can work, but not sure it will. And, sort of just honestly shared. And then even after the George Floyd murders, had courageous conversations with people and listened. And so I think you're right. We can't just sit and think we've done all that work now, because here we are going into the second year. So we need to keep those conversations going and keep telling people. It seems like, one of my favorite stories was one day I'd been with Southwest like 10 years, and Herb was making his annual speeches, and the person next to me said, oh, I've heard him say that 10 times, every year. And the person on the other side of me said, yeah, but the person sitting behind you just got hired last week. And so you have to communicate over and over and over. And by the way, it doesn't hurt to hear the same message 10 times. It really does help it sink into your psyche.
My communications person says repetition does not spoil the prayer. And you do sometimes feel like you're saying it over and over, but I've learned that no matter how many times you say things, there'll still be one person that says, I haven't heard that. I think your question is a great one, Derek, and I don't think there is an easy answer for the question. I think it is one thing that we say a lot at Allbirds with respect to our diversity initiatives is that it's big things and small. And safety is a very personal issue. What makes me feel safe is different than what makes you feel safe. So you're dealing with employees that all have a different relationship with safety. I think what Libby said is absolutely right, which is you need to keep the lines of communication open. Absolutely, the answers cannot just come from the top. You have to tap into the collective wisdom of the organization and how people are feeling. And we do this by having one-on-one conversations. We had all hands every week, every 10 days. It was heavy lifting. There were a lot of times where we didn't have good answers for questions, and sometimes we did the wrong thing. But when we realized it and when we were told, we went back and said, gosh, you're right. That was not the intention, or we missed it completely. And so it was, last year was hard. This year, it feels a little easier, but not completely the same. I don't know it'll ever be the same, but in a way, I think you're right. I think it's built our resilience, but also our humanity. I think if we all get comfortable with showing all of ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that's true vulnerability and authenticity, right? And again, I agree with Garry that the opposite of fear is trust, but it's not like, okay, now we all trust each other. Now we have an organization that trusts. It is a moment by moment thing, right? And recognizing that it goes up, it goes down. We show up either with fear or with trust, depending on what's going on in our lives.
Yeah, I think that, what became really obvious back in March last year when, the COVID roller coaster started, thinking about uncertainty was something that really created a lot of fear. And then we came to grips with what is uncertainty. And uncertainty is a series of future events that may or may not occur. And how could we focus on dividing those into more probable than not probable buckets, so the things that may not occur didn't kind of overshadow us? And then once we've thought about that, is, as Libby said, not talking about what we're going to do, but talking about why we're doing what we're doing, and engaging people in that conversation was very, very important. I have a thing about communication. Communication always and always. Always you can, and always when you can. And then finally, something that's really on my mind right now is re-entry. We were set off in a rocket out of our normal atmosphere, and we've been orbiting a different atmosphere during COVID. And we're about to hopefully commence re-entry. But the people coming back are not the same people who went up in that rocket. So, we've got to start thinking about refreshing relationships. Lives have changed. Some of the people we work with, we haven't seen for over a year. Some of the people that we work with, we've never met at all because they've been onboarded in this time. So when we come back together, are we going to take time to actually reacquaint our relationships? What's changed in your life since we last met? And how do we understand that better? Because the conversation you had at the water cooler on March 6th, 2020 is not the person that you left. Mm-hmm. They're a different person that's coming back. So as in any rocket ship coming through the atmosphere, re-entering, there's going to be some turmoil. There's going to be some disruption. Yeah. We need to be ready for it to be able to land that rocket ship.
So that's a great next question. So, and bless you, Laila, also. And I was going to say, so tactically speaking, and practically speaking, what are you all doing on this exact topic? Because I agree with you completely, Garry, that this is a momentous task again for leaders and the broader team of people that we're working together. What specific things are you planning to do to create the space for those relationships to be refreshed, to allow for this new form of disruption that's going to be amazing, I think, and also, people are going to, it's the rubber band effect. So how are you planning? What are you doing to address?
Don't know yet.
Okay, appreciate the honesty.
What I'm doing is coming to the true reality that we've got to do something. The alarm bells are ringing, and we have enough time now. So what we are doing is talking amongst our leadership team, gaining insights from other people about how we might be able to do that. How do we bring people back together and respect who they are now? So don't have a plan yet, do have a process to think about it, and we will be working on it.
Great. Laila or Libby, anything more concrete that you may have on this? Yeah, by all means.
I always think making things fun is a really great way to go if it fits into your culture. So while we've been doing these Zoom meetings, I have several groups that are doing things like sending out a bottle of wine and some snacks and having a happy hour, and even inviting family members or a dog, show your pet during the, making things so that we feel a part of each other's lives. And I think when we re-enter and we're back in the office, whatever that looks like, because I think some companies will keep going virtual, some will have hybrid relationships, but how do we make it fun, and how do we keep the ships going. I'm on 2 boards where we have brand new board members that we interviewed, and I was on the nominations committee of both those boards. We interviewed them, met them, and brought them on board. And I feel like I've known them all my life, but I've never seen them in person. So when I meet them in person, you know, we've got to do something fun and arrange to build some of the things we didn't build as we move forward. So I think fun is going to be part of it.
I love that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Derek, sorry.
I was going to say, I think you're ahead of your time on this one as well. Again, I'm a big advocate of fun in the workplace. And so go ahead, Leila. Just wanted to echo that point.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Last in the fall, when it got very clear that people were just so tired, and a lot of our business comes in during the holidays, and we had a number of what we call wellness days, and we had people coming in and talking to us about different aspects of self-care. And at the end, one of the things we did is we brought in a couple of professors who just came out with a book about humor, and how humor actually is one of the tools in our toolkit to help get through tough times, and not to forget about that as well. I think, you know, like Garry, I can't tell you today what the future will look like. I think it would be hard for anybody to say today, given how radically things have been changing, and not always in one direction. I do think that there has to be a lot more flexibility. And I think the way we work is going to be different moving forward. And when we come together, at least the way that we've been thinking about it, it's going to be a lot more focused on the C's: connection, collaboration, creativity, right? Because we've proven we can work from home and get things done and be effective. But what's missing is that human connection and the spark that comes out of just the conversations that happen when you're sort of riffing off of each other. And we still think there's a lot of value in that. What that will look like, we're not really sure yet, but we are starting to redesign our offices to have more open, collaborative spaces for when that time comes. And I think, you know, just the word well-being and wellness, we talk about that a lot more today than we have in the past. And we're also a lot more intentional and about highlighting the things that we're doing with respect to DEIB. We've established, again, a speaker series for the year, and nothing like big and amazing, but just doing fireside chats with people that we know. We have 2 women we hired onto our board last year, so we're going to be doing a fireside chat with them next week for in honor of Women's Week. We highlight companies we do work with that come from the Black community or Latinx. We do a major event every year for Pride, and just really trying to take the opportunities to celebrate, again, what is good, so we can amplify that, kind of fill our cup, because we know it's gonna spill out along the way. I think that's, at least for the moment, those are the things that are helping.
I think one of the other things that is important about us coming back together is not only, as you said, the connection, the collaboration, but what I would call the ability to repair. And here's what I mean by that. You know, if you think about the conversation you may have on a Zoom call or on a phone call or wherever it is, and you leave the conversation and there was something in it that, oh, I don't feel comfortable about that. When you're together, it's easy to walk down the corridor, stick your head in the office, sit down and say, Laila, you know, I didn't really mean it to sound like that, and not allow it to fester and become something than it should be. So I think, you know, I've said we will never be a virtual company, but we will be a better company because we've learned to be better at being virtual. So I think it's not, we're calling it work from where, not work from home or the office. It's work from where is the way we're thinking about it. And it's not an either or, it's a both and, as far as we see it.
Always is.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk a lot on our side in our organization about assuming positive intent, and for that exact reason, Garry, that people can misinterpret things. And naturally, I mean, do you see, in the context of forgiveness, right, and the idea of that being upheld and above, how we're cultivating people's ability to like not think about themselves as much, but think about the team and to put the role of empathy very clearly. How do you see that evolving back to this new reality as we come back into the workplace?
It's funny you mentioned that. I was listening to a podcast the other day. A friend of mine, Martin Lundsten, just released a new book called The Ministry of Common Sense. And he was on a podcast with Chester Elton, and who wrote.
I love Chester. Yeah, Chester's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, they were talking about the difference between sympathy and empathy. And he talked about it this way. He said, sympathy is you're out on a boat and someone is on the deck and you're in rough seas and they're throwing up over the side of the boat. And Libby comes along with a roll of paper towels and gives them the paper towels and gives them a pat on the back and said, I'm sorry you're feeling that way. That's sympathy. Empathy is when Libby starts throwing up as well. Now they really feel how people feel. And that really stuck with me, is how do you get in someone else's shoes on how, that's empathy. And that's something that we're missing a lot. So, there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. And I have a saying, leadership fails when ego eats empathy instead of empathy eating ego. And that's where I think it's important.
And not that I'm not empathetic, but I probably would be throwing up.
I think that goes to one of the questions that's in the chat here.
I was going to just say that same thing.
Were you?
Go right ahead. Go with it.
Taking over your job.
Go ahead. Go with it. Go with it. Yeah.
Do you want me to read it?
By all means,
Sarah?
Go for it. Yes.
There's a question here in the chat that says, it seems to be easier to create a set of corporate values and principles and more difficult to enroll the executive team to live in them. Please share your experiences and how you brought the executive team along to display the behaviors and demonstrate the values. Clearly, the exec team example leaves a lasting memory. I think now I'll answer it.
Please, yes.
I'd love to hear what the others have to say. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, the tone for an organization is set from the very top, always is. I always say that the organization cannot rise to a higher level of consciousness than its leader. And so if the leader is consistently fear-based and driven by ego, then it's going to push everything down. The organization is going to be driven that way as well. I think some of the mechanical things you can do is you establish a set of values, of operating principles, of working agreements. You publish them, and then you actually do work against what it means to embody them. And that is some of the work that we are doing at Allbirds. It's the work we did at Pete's. It is it's work that you have to live every day. And if the leadership is not reflecting what you've put out there as your values, they need to be told and held accountable. I will tell you, I left Pete's in 2013, and now being at Allbirds in 2020, the difference in how employees show up in 6-7 years is, really different. And it could be one company to the other, but employees tell you today, and then they have lots of means and how they can tell you, right? Social and anonymous Q&A boards. So they will tell you when they don't think you are walking the talk, and you just have to listen.
One of the things that, really worked for Southwest, but it was really hard. And I think this is the difficulty that most organizations have, is when any member of leadership, but not just leadership, any member of the organization was not living by the values, we got rid of them. Now that sounds really mean and not like the nice Southwest Airlines, but we had in our performance review for most employees, 20% of their performance was based on the Southwest spirit. And for leaders, 20% was on leading by example, which included living the values of the organization. So we didn't have to wait till it was performance review time, like Laila says. We had open communication, and if somebody was not living by our values, we found out about it, whether somebody shared with another leader or whether it was by observation. But as soon as you have one or two high-level exits, and even somebody got promoted to a supervisor, but they didn't make it too long, people get the message that this is serious and living by our values is important to us. That became, though, very difficult for me when I got to Yahoo. So just to let you know, I understand how painful it is. For example, we would buy a company because that company had a technology and talent in that space that we really needed to succeed. And then the leader of that company, the founder, would be, somebody who would not fit into our culture. In those cases, we had to do a workaround, like take everyone on the department that reported to that founder and have them report to someone else, because we couldn't have someone leading others that way, but the behavior would still be there. So we didn't come up with a perfect solution because the nature of our business didn't allow us to. So I think, I would have rather just got rid of the person, but it wasn't just me making the decision. And by the way, the person was the most brilliant person in this particular new technology in the universe. So it was hard, very, very hard.
Yeah, I think both have really said what's important: zero tolerance. But firstly, defining what zero tolerance means. So you've got to the values of the organization have to be embedded in the behaviors. And like Libby said, in our organization, Ken Blanchard and I wrote a book together called Don't Mark My Paper, Help Me Get an A, which is about helping people win at work. And it describes that part of that is every quarter in our company, we have a conversation around our 6 values, and we ask every tribe member to share how they've lived our values in the past 90 days. And we only have 2 measurements of values. You either live them or you visit them, and we don't want a lot of visitors. And again, not every company's for everyone, but if you can't live within that organization, well, we'll have to share you with a competitor. I mean, if that's what we need to do, that's what we'll do. But again, it's really about having the values embedded and zero tolerance. But being clear about what it means. Each one of our values has a written paragraph of what that looks like. And that's what's really important. So you've got to be brave, but it's important.
I completely agree. I love the feedback from all of you and the ideas. The brilliance in this virtual room is just stunning. So each of you has mentioned your book, or at least Garry and maybe you have mentioned your books, and a couple of the themes that come up. Laila, I want to give credit to you because we talked about the concept of consistency and repetition, the small things in the day-to-day. The title of your book, I have a feeling, kind of resonates with that, as well as the broader topic here. I'd love to just give you a chance to talk about the inspiration for that book and anything you want to share. And I think that'll probably open up our final question.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yes, I have a book coming out April 13th. It's called Strong Like Water, How I Found the Courage to Lead with Love in Business and in Life. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's really, it's a leadership book cleverly disguised as the memoir, which is how I'm positioning it. It really covers a period of time that was very difficult for me. I experienced a lot of loss in my life. But how those losses then acted as a catalyst for me to learn some very important lessons about who I was, how I was showing up, realizations I made that ultimately helped me to be a better leader. And everything we're talking about today about having the emotional intelligence, the capacity, the resilience, the empathy, those were all a lot of the insights and the learnings that I picked up in those years that really helped to shift how I viewed the world and how I saw my role as a leader. So, so I love the fact that now we're talking about leading with love. I was nervous when I decided on that title because I thought I might be too gushy, and look, here we are. So, so we are.
I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that. So in terms of the final question, just for a moment for each of you. So as we were talking about this renegade rebel concept of love in the workplace, how do you want to be remembered as leaders? I mean, you all are so accomplished. Each of you has brought a trailblazer approach, but when you think about your legacy as leaders, where do you want people to, what's the single thing that comes to your heart when you think about that you would pass along to the next generation of business leaders?
Garry, who? Mine would be based on probably the thing I read 25 years ago that really was a trigger in changing my thinking. And it's something the Dalai Lama said. And he says, our purpose in life is to make people happy. If we can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them. And when I read that and I observed business, there was a lot more hurt than happy. And it was on that day at 35,000 feet, somewhere between Los Angeles and Sydney, that I really said, I'm gonna lean into the happy instead of the hurt.
My answer
you,
is
Garry.
really that test for servant leadership. You know, I would want people to feel like I left them better off than they were when they got me, whether they learned or grew or made career progress. And I have to say that one of the great things about being my age and sort of on the tail end of my career is that I get notes and letters several times a year. And one I got in the middle of COVID that just made so much difference to me was a pilot that was retiring at 65 from Southwest Airlines. And he said I interviewed him, but you know, the influence I had during the interview and helping him get the job, and he remembered me to send a note during his retirement celebration. So that was just like an amazing situation to have in your life, to realize how many people's lives you affected, especially when you've done the hiring and sometimes the firing. But anyway.
That's really nice.
Mhm.
I think for me, I'd love for people to say that they feel like I made a difference in their life and that I made them better, that I was able to be honest and courageous in giving feedback that enabled them to see things about themselves that may have been hard to see. And I did it in a way that left them whole, that made them feel, that didn't hurt them, that had them loving themselves more instead of feeling like they were less than. I mean, that's a pretty high bar, but if we're gonna think of an epitaph, that would be it.
Well, I think we all want to set the bar high. So with that, I just want to just reiterate to each of you, I see all of you and just the rebel values, heart-centered leaders that you are, and just the influence and impact you are making in your work and in people's lives. And just in the short time we've been together here, it's obvious the ripple that your work will have and is having. And I just want to say again, thank you for spending time with me, with our audience, taking the time out of your very active days to share your wisdom with others, that we can apply it in our lives and our businesses. And it's really been a pleasure, and I've been humbled and honored to spend this with you. So I wish you all the best throughout this new year of post-pandemic life. And I'm excited for the collaborations that will happen as a result. So thank you all. Wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate
Time
it.
with you.
Alrighty.
Thank you all. Thank you for our audience. We'll see you again on the next Rebels of the Heart segment, and we'll talk soon. Be well, everyone.